So with careful reading, yeah, it's pretty clear. At the proper time, the angel says, I will come to you and Sarah will have her son. Why does an angel have to come to Avraham to make sure that Sarah has a son? Well, now we understand it. The angel had to come to Avraham at the sacrificing site and stop him from doing it so that Sarah could have her son. Let's talk about the subject of the week. Sarah, our matriarch Sarah. How great was she? She was so great that at the age of 7, she was as holy and as awesome as she was at the age of 100. And at the age of 100, she was as innocent as she was at 7. Anybody beat that? It's almost beyond imagination. How are you completely righteous and wise at the age of 7 as if you were 100? And how can you be as innocent at 100 as you were at 7? Didn't life kill the dream you dreamt? The dream you dreamed? Not for her. And it wasn't an easy life either. But we spoke about this, I think, a number of times. But the story comes around every year, so we're going to try to find more meaning in it every year. That incident where the angel tells Avraham that Sarah is going to have a child, and Sarah laughed. The simple meaning is that she scoffed at it. She thought it was preposterous. And God said to Avraham, why is she laughing? Is anything impossible for God? Which again gives the impression that she was being cynical, unbelieving, and that God was a bit offended. That's the apparent view of the story. But we know that in the Torah there's always more to the story than meets the eye. And if we're told that Sarah was as great at the age of 7 as she was at the age of 100, at the age of 100 she was not laughing or scoffing. She was happily raising her child. So how can you, on the one hand, say that she was perfect her whole life, and on the other hand, say that she was laughing and scoffing and being cynical? To where God had to reprimand her. So the deeper understanding of the story is that, of course, Sarah did not laugh out of cynicism. Besides the fact that she was not cynical, it's just not polite. Somebody gives you a blessing and you laugh. It's just not good manners. Even if she was cynical, laugh at somebody's blessing. So there must be more to the story, right? Sarah wasn't laughing or scoffing. She was lobbying. The angel said she's going to have a son. Sarah intuited that that son is not going to live very long, and God is going to take him back. So she laughed and she said, "This is a bracha? Give me a real bracha." So God said, "Okay, is there anything impossible for God?" So, yes, you'll have a son and he will live long. Happy? And she said, "Yes, now I'm happy." And in fact, when Avraham took Yitzchak to the Akedah and brought him up onto the altar and was about to slaughter him, an angel appears and says, "Don't do it." And Avraham says, "Who are you? God told me to do this. You can't counteract his command." So the angel said, "You don't recognize me. I'm the angel that came and told you that Sarah is going to have a child, and she lobbied that the child should live long. And I said, is anything impossible for God? He's going to live long. So now I can't let you do this." So Yitzchak was not killed, and Sarah had prevailed in her lobbying on behalf of her son. Quite a different story, isn't it? But now, at least, the story is in context and is consistent. You can't, on the one hand, say Sarah was a greater prophet than Avraham, and Sarah was perfect when she was 7 as she was at 100, and she was as innocent at 100 as she was at 7. But when she heard a blessing, she laughed. That's out of context. If you think she laughed out of cynicism, you're not talking about the same person. We're also told that when the two of them went down to Egypt, Avraham said, "Tell them you're my sister, because otherwise they'll kill me, because they're going to want to marry you or take you. So you'll save my life by telling them you're my sister." Because Egyptians had morals, you know. They did not believe in committing adultery. So if some woman interested them, they would have to kill the husband first so that it wouldn't be adultery. The funny thing is, with that story, Avram was not ready to fight for his wife. He went to war against 4 kings to save his nephew's life, but he wouldn't fight to save his wife's life or honor. Why wasn't he ready to go to war if Sarah was attacked or molested? King Solomon says it's so awesome and so impressive how Avraham believed in Sarah so explicitly, so thoroughly, that in her righteousness, nothing bad could happen to her. Nothing. But he who was not as righteous, he could get killed. So he asked her to say that she is his sister because no harm will ever come to her, but he needs to be protected. So was Avraham wrong? Was Sarah really a non-believer, a skeptic? Of course not. So the correct version of the story in context is that Sarah laughed because she was lobbying for her son. And the laughter was not cynical. It was, you call that a miracle? You're going to give something and take it back? Oh, you call that a blessing? That's not a real blessing. Give me a real blessing. So the angel said, okay, I guarantee it. And that's why he had to come to Avraham to stop him from slaughtering Yitzchak. Now there's an observation made by one of the sages. The text reads, Avraham bound Yitzchak, placed him on top of the wood, stretched out his hand, and took the knife to slaughter Yitzchak. And the question that this commentary asks, what do you mean he stretched out his hand? Is that really necessary? Can't you just say he took the knife? He stretched out his hand. It's a little dramatizing, like slow motion. He stretched out his hand and took the knife. He took the knife. What's with the drama? The literal translation of he stretched out his hand is he sent his hand. Vayishlach. He sent his hand to pick up the knife. And the explanation is Avraham's devotion to God was so completely and thoroughly embodied within him that when there was something God wanted him to do, his body instinctively moved to do it. If he was unconscious, his body would still continue to do what God asks. Whatever mitzvah there was, his body did it automatically, like God's will was also his will. No interference, no separation. Here, Avram is about to fulfill the commandment, and his hand won't move. His hand did not naturally reach for the knife. To Avram, that was a shock. What is wrong with me? What has happened to me? And he assumed that it was the Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, which he never knew he had, was resisting the mitzvah. But he would have none of that, so he sent his hand. The only time in his life that he had to actually make an effort to do a mitzvah. It did not come instinctively. Why did his arm or his hand not reach for the knife? Was it his Yetzer Hara? His hand didn't reach for the knife because there was no commandment to slaughter Yitzchak. It was a test. So there was no such mitzvah. And instinctively, his body knew there's no such mitzvah. So the hand did not move towards the knife. The instruction was, take your son and bind him on the altar. That he had already done. Now he thought that he was supposed to slaughter him. There was no such commandment. The commandment was bring him up on the altar. Now, that could be understood to mean make a sacrifice out of him. But if you take it literally, bring him up on the altar. So he did. He brought him up on the altar. And then his hand said, that's it. And it wouldn't move. In his humility, he assumed it was some Yetzer Hara that he had contacted somewhere. If Sarah was greater than Avraham, then all her instincts were pure godliness. How could you even believe that she would laugh at a blessing? Now, what made her think that this was going to be a temporary blessing? You could very rationally say that's her divine instincts. She instinctively knew that there was going to be an Akedah. But that can't be true because there wasn't going to be an Akedah. So if she had an instinct that her son was going to die, then her instinct was wrong. Her son was never destined to die. Her problem was, did Avraham know that? She knew that there would not be a sacrificing of Yitzchak. But God was testing Avraham, and she didn't know if Avraham would pass the test. So she lobbied with the angel that the angel should prevent it from happening should Avraham decide to do it. And that's why the angel had to come to Avraham at Mount Moriah and say, no, 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 no. Sarah knew that you would go through with it, and so she sent me to make sure you don't do it. How wise, how prescient, how incredible is that? So, for example, after Sarah laughs, the angel says, nothing is impossible for God. At the right time, I will come to you, Avraham, and Sarah will have her son. Well, that kind of gives it away. If you want to make sure that Sarah has a child, why don't you go to her? Why are you going to come to Avraham to guarantee that Sarah is going to have her son? So, with careful reading, yeah, it's pretty clear. At the proper time, the angel says, Ove Elecha, I will come to you, and Sarah will have her son. Why does an angel have to come to Avraham to make sure that Sarah has a son? Well, now we understand it. The angel had to come to Avraham at the sacrificing site and stop him from doing it so that Sarah could have her son that she lobbied for. Then we are told that when Sarah heard about the event, she died. Again, the simple meaning is she was so horrified and so shocked that she died. Again, that is not her character. She was not frail of heart. She was not the hysterical type. No, that can't be the case. It makes more sense. What did she hear? Avraham takes his son and goes off on a 3-day trip. She heard about the Akedah. What did she hear? She heard that the angel came and stopped Avraham from doing it. So what made her die? So the meaning is not that she died from shock. The meaning is after she knew that the angel had kept his promise and that Yitzchak was now going to live a long life, now she could die in peace. Not she died because of the Akedah. It's that she would refuse to die until she was sure that the angel had kept his promise. Once the angel kept his promise, now Sarah could die in peace. And in fact, she did die because she was 127. That's 7 years over the limit. So on the one hand, we see a great prophet, a spiritual giant, an intuitive, and on the other hand, we see just a devoted mother. One final thought. Why isn't all this spelled out explicitly in the Torah? Why do we have to read between the lines to get the picture? So it's as if the Torah was written to people who knew all of this already. But that can't be. The Torah was written for everyone. Why are the stories about the matriarch so skimpy? Other stories are much more generous. Like, for example, the story of Eliezer when he went to find a wife for Yitzchak. We're given the story blow by blow, play by play, like a good baseball announcer. He came to the well and he said to God, "Help me find the right woman. The sign will be if I ask her if she would draw some water for me to drink, and she says, yes, indeed, and I will draw some water for your camel as well, that will be the sign that she's the right one." Now, the Torah could have said, and that's what happened, and that's how Rivka was chosen. Enough said? No. Then the Torah says, Rivka came down to the well, and Eliezer said to her, "Would you please draw some water for me to drink?" And she said, "Yes, and I will also draw water for your camel." And he said, "Oh my God, I found her." And then he goes to her house, to her family, and he repeats the story all over again. Very generous in its details and quotes. But every story about a woman, about a matriarch, is so brief. It's so uh, economical in its wording. The obvious reason is because the matriarchs did not want to be exposed. They were modest, which explains, or at least enlightens us. Sarah said to Avraham, "Banish the maid and her son from our home, because her son will not inherit with my son Yitzchak. Avraham felt terrible, but God assured him that he should listen to Sarah because, yes, indeed, only Yitzchak inherits. But here's the question. Was it necessary to quote Sarah? Sarah told him to send Yishmael away. He didn't want to do that. So God came and said, send him away. Yitzchak is your inheritor. Wouldn't that be enough? Do we have to say that it was Sarah told him to do it? He hesitated. So God said to him, listen to Sarah. Why can't you leave Sarah out of the picture? God came to Avraham and said, only Yitzchak is going to inherit. So it's nice to give Sarah the credit, but is it necessary? Sarah was probably uncomfortable with that whole story being recorded. Why do you have to talk about me? I want my privacy. Now everyone in the world for the rest of ever is going to be quoting me. I said this, I said that. I don't like this. Stay out of my life. So obviously, this particular incident is so universally relevant and so necessary for the world to know that it overrules her modesty. And it becomes a story in Torah. It's a Torah story, not a Sarah story. Because as far as Sarah was concerned, don't say this. Don't expose me like that. Leave my private life private. So wherever we read a quote of a matriarch or of a great prophetess, you have to wonder why. You know they don't like to be exposed. Why did the Torah expose them? It must be a story or a message or a lesson that is so relevant for all time, forever. In some way, it was more important even than the woman's modesty. And so it had to be told. And it had to be told in her name. Because that's relevant also. So this story happened with Sarah. Rachel, for example, stole her father's idols and tried to hide them from him. Why do we need to know this? What difference does this make in history? And when you read the story, you come away with a feeling of, what was that all about? So what happened? What is the point of this story? Of all the things that Rachel did in her whole life, this is the story you want to tell me about her? What happened to the other 100 and some years? Didn't do anything in those 100 years? So we have to take the stories in the Torah much more seriously because it's a Torah story, not a gossip column. Bottom line, what do we get from all these stories? Sarah was great at 7 and innocent at 100. Okay, what do you want from me? Why do I need to hear this? I'm not 7 anymore, so that's too late. Not 20 anymore, that's too late. Hopefully, when I reach 100, I'll become a mensch or something. But what does the story with Sarah have to do with me? Very valid question. Because if the story is not about me, then it's not Torah, and it's just a book. You know, people say to me, I can't start studying Torah. I can't. Why? I mean, because once I read it and once I know it, I'm going to have to do it. So, wow, what kind of book is this? I never heard somebody say, I can't read Shakespeare. No, if I read Shakespeare, I would have to talk like that. That would annoy everybody. Nobody ever said that. Read Shakespeare and then put it up back on the shelf and forget about it. Nobody feels or thinks that if you read Shakespeare, you are committed, you're obligated. But most people know if you read the Torah, boy, you're going to have to get your act together. That's the uniqueness of the Torah, just as a book. So, also interesting, the Torah doesn't moralize. No place in the Torah does it say, and now that you know the story, now you have to do what Sarah did, be like her. It never says that anywhere. The moral of the story, no, no, there's no moral to the story. The story is over. Now, what am I supposed to do with it? I'm supposed to draw a moral conclusion. So, well, why are you leaving this up to me? Because everyone's moral conclusion is different than everyone else's. So, of course, the average person is not going to say, okay, so I guess I should be as great at 7 as I am. No, that's not going to be. So, everyone finds the relevant message that is appropriate to their lives when they read the story. If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there is a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it. These ideas, these messages, this approach to life, this approach to Torah, to meaning, and to morals is vital for the world today. And we need to get this message out to the entire world. It is universal, it's essential, it's indispensable. To support this effort, if you want to be a partner in this crime, check out the link and make a donation. It really helps a lot. And thank you in advance.